Welcome and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to CEO Club from the Middle East, from Dubai. And you may not have seen me before on this, but you have seen the great Chief and the great Don Miguel. So we're here out in Dubai. There's a lot for us to talk about, a lot for you to gain from this session. And this is more of a casual discussion. I think before we've seen a lot of formal discussions, but today we're going to get a lot of the off the record, behind the scenes chat, what we talk about, and really to rewire you guys.
Absolutely. I think a good place to begin is, well, what are we doing here in the Middle East? What are we doing here in Dubai? Why are we here?
Yeah.
We're here for a lot of reasons. I think tangibles and intangibles. We're here to explore Middle Eastern opportunities for Wealth Nation, global expansion. We're here to meet with potential key strategic partners for Wealth Nation, hedge fund managers, accountants, lawyers. We're meeting actually with one of the partners of the only regulated cryptocurrency exchange in the entire Middle East, and some other people that we'll talk to you about very, very soon. But I think more than just that, we came out here to get a different perspective, right? Because sometimes when you're in one area, you're there Monday to Sunday for, some chief is there pretty much every single day, most of the days.
8 days a week?
8 days a week. It's very difficult to start thinking outside the box when you get run down with a routine. Yeah. And sometimes coming to a place that is just exuding excellence like Dubai allows you to start thinking out of the box and may just unlock a lot of different ways of thinking and opportunities. What do you think?
Now, Faz, explain to us what we're wearing here. Walk us through it.
This is it's a very traditional dressing. Formerly you call it a jubba, but when we went to buy it, he was saying all sorts of different words from it that we didn't actually catch. But formerly it's known as a jubba, and then you have a cap underneath, and this scarf at the top, and you've got this thing that keeps it all intact at the top. And
this thing, very technical. I like it.
I mean, the biggest benefit that I've seen from wearing this is it's very loose. It's one piece, and it's very. I think when you wear this, you don't have to really think about what you're wearing. I reckon in the Middle East, in the UAE, a lot of people wear this, and there are no longer brands associated. You don't have a Louis Vuitton jubba or a Gucci scarf that goes with it, right? So you're just wearing one thing. You're not caring about it, and this comes into that whole decision fatigue theory. You don't have to think about what you're wearing,
right?
And not only that, there's no comparison then there left. Like, you can't tell the difference between a wealthy guy and a not so wealthy guy. You can just say that he belongs to that place, sort of thing. But I mean, you guys bought some, and obviously we will show you guys pictures.
And there's freedom as well.
This freedom is excellence. I mean,
you're not wearing any trousers. You are wearing
some whatever. We're not going to say what I'm wearing. But there is some substance there. But let's actually get into the conversation what today's CEO Club is about, and we came up with this topic: rewiring. And the reason I wanted to say rewiring is because I think things that we're doing here, changing where we are, our environment, I think that contributes towards people rewiring their minds. And I think the reason why something like that is important is because sometimes we're all aligned to our perspective. And this is sort of my own thinking. I don't think I've read this in a book, but the way you think is to do with your perspective and the way you were grown up. Right? In terms of how you perceive anything. The way you walk, the way you talk, the way you like food, your cars, it's all to do with your perspective and growing up. And you've been wired to think like that. But what if that wiring, the way you've been wired, doesn't allow you to achieve your goals? But the way someone else might be wired could be different. For example, with me, and we mentioned this earlier, and this is going pretty deep to me personally. Miguel asked me, how do you feel when someone compliments you? And I said, I don't like it at all. I get complacent, and that's the way I'm wired. Some people love compliments, they thrive off it, but I don't. But it may be if I rewired myself to actually like compliments and then compliment people back, maybe that can change the way I approach certain situations. So my question to you guys is, how would you go about rewiring? Do you think there is a need for rewiring, and has it happened to you before?
I think there's a massive need for people to completely rewire the way they think. The issue, I think, what's kind of worldwide with the way we rewire culturally is we plan on rewiring every year. You make a New Year's resolution, you promise to yourself you're never going to do this, that, or the other. You tell yourself some new vows that you're going to keep about the gym and all the stuff you're going to not eat versus eat. And then you realize actually you're at civil war with yourself because there's a big difference between what your hands, your heart, and your head wants to do.
Yeah.
You know? And so if you don't essentially rewire what's going on the inside, if you can't change the way you think fundamentally, then it's very difficult to change your behaviors. Rewiring for me, though, has been an interesting one. And maybe I come from, I don't know if you've read this book, Switch on Your Brain, Dr. Caroline Leaf. She talks about the brain being elastic. That it used to be believed that the way you are is the way you are, you can't change, it's your hard coding, your wiring. When you got to a certain age, certain chemicals set the way your brain is, it will never change. But what they discovered actually is that the more what you say about yourself, actually, they call it neuroelasticity. That what you say about yourself continually over a period of time, and she actually says 21 days, has the ability to completely rewire your entire brain in 21 days. And so what she'll do is she'll get people to write a list, like a script, of new belief systems that they want to adopt into their own life. Systems that they don't believe are true about themselves. And I think this is why it's so hard for people to do it, because we just don't believe the person we're talking about is really us. And for 21 days, she'll take I don't know what they call it, it's a sonogram of the brain. They'll take a picture of the brain before, and she'll show the toxic spots in the brain, the black spots, and she'll say, this is negative thinking, this releases this chemical and that chemical. Within 21 days, you see a healthy brain, new synapses, new firing off, new neurons are built, damaged areas are fixed, or new things are built around it. And so I think the strongest way that we can rewire ourselves is to literally change how we speak to ourselves.
Well, for me, I'll be very, very honest. Two examples. Some people may have heard one of my worst fears, if not the worst fear I used to have, was public speaking, right? But I always saw myself speaking in front of crowds. So that was a big paradox. So the very first time I spoke, I used to do a lot of spoken word poetry. I was a bit of a wordsmith. I still am today, but in a different way. So I had written something and I was asked to go perform it. And then when I had gone up on stage, I was confident. In my mind, I thought I was. As soon as I spoke, the wind direction changed and nothing came out. What felt like 30 seconds of saying nothing felt like hours. And that traumatized me. So I refused to get up on stage or really speak about anything for years on end. However, when I started to get into business, I realized that these were really a battle with each other. I can't stay quiet about things and succeed and prosper in my specific goals. So I just had to act the way I want to feel, and soon I started to feel the way I chose to act. And it came back to, I started to create a thing that I said to myself every single day. And I'd say, I remember the very first time I joined Wealth Nation and you asked me to speak, it was in the Stratford Circus Centre. And that's the first time I spoke in a while, right? I've been out of the game for a while. And I said to myself 1,000 times before, I love my audience loves me. I love my audience loves me. I recorded myself saying that for about 30 minutes the night before, and I went to sleep with that in my head every night. I love my audience loves me. I started saying it while listening to it in the morning, on the shower, on the way there, again and again. And by the time, I just said to myself, cameras, light, action. And everything that I had imagined, I'd played it from the beginning. Everything that I wanted to happen, I played it so succinctly in my mind that it just caught up with what I already thought. So I had to make it so specific in my mind.
You have to be willing to do some very unusual things.
Absolutely.
Things that people don't normally do, things that we're not really trained to do.
Yes, and public speaking was just one of them. It came to building, understanding things like procrastination. I had to understand when I procrastinate, it's usually because of a couple of things. I remember a past trauma which causes me to withdraw and ignore what I'm supposed to do. And I had to realize that when I had to identify the triggers to those trauma and prevent those, or at least engage in something such as working out that gets my my natural dopamine levels up, so that battles or at least overcompensates for the trauma or the serotonin going through my brain, you know.
Now, Faz, you are switched on. I know you don't like compliments, so I'll mix it with insults. You are switched on, you suck, and you are you're switched on. You are active. You are a go-getter. You're somebody who you see what you want to achieve, you're gonna get it. You beeline. That's the way I describe you. You just beeline straight to the goal. Have you always been like that? Have you always been the confident guy? Who was Faz? Maybe who's the kid Faz? I meet you in school. Who are you?
You know, in school I was a very likable kid, but I wasn't always okay. So my thing is that when I was growing up, I wasn't a very clever person, but my weakness was my discipline, because my brain, the way I've learned it now, is anything I practice, and if I do practice it and then I achieve it, that is enough confirmation for me to say I can now do it. If I've done it once, I can do this 100 times.
Yeah.
For me, that was rewiring, but also for me that came about, and I kid you not, I used to study chemistry, economics, and business studies at my A-levels. And chemistry was a hard subject. And one of the harder questions used to be right at the end of the paper, and it used to be like a calculus question with all these chemical equations going on. And the exam didn't care about whether you got the answer right or wrong. It only cared about the way you were doing it. When I realized that, I thought, if I can get the method correct without the outcome being right, as long as I'm on the right path, even if I miss one or two steps, at least I've known the method to do it.
Okay.
But when it comes to rewiring, and this whole idea of being switched on is to do with the fact that I'm switched on about things that I like.
Right.
I'm putting myself in the environment that I'm continuously talking or always being switched on and thinking about things which are coherent to my environment. If I am walking, the thing is that I'm not a fan of gambling. I don't like the fact that there are odds. I think there are better investments. If I walk into a casino, I'm looking at these people and I'm saying, well, you're quite dumb. You can put your money in the S&P 500.
Right.
You're better off, right? But if I walk into a casino, I can't talk like them, I can't think like them, and I can't be switched on like them.
Yeah.
So again, I think this comes back to environment and the whole sort of rewiring thing. And the question is pretty good, actually, in terms of what I was like, say, as a kid. As a kid, I liked the fact that, there was, people like instant gratification right now. Back then, I liked instant, I like to see instant change. So, you see stock market changes, right? I didn't like looking at the weather because that was produced on a daily time frame, right? As in, they would say it's 20 degrees Celsius for today.
Yeah.
But I want to know what is it in half an hour.
Okay.
But if you compare that to the stock market numbers at the bottom, they're changing every 2-3 minutes. It's up and down.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, for me, that was like, I need to be switched on to know why that's happening, right? The other thing I was actually going to touch upon with rewiring is, I did a bit of research and I had a couple of conversations with someone who has done very good research on mental health. And they said something to me, and this goes back to times where I was working extremely hard and I didn't know how to work smart. So I just used to put in hours, and I think and throwing anything that stuck. That was my mentality. I was working sort of endless hours. I could stay awake, but it wasn't healthy for my brain.
Yeah.
And as a result, I would just pass out, and it wouldn't be healthy for my body, my mind. The way I had to sort of get out of that whole sort of stigma that, the whole panicking thing that, hey, look, I'm gonna crash, was to understand the brain. Now we've got neural pathways, which you mentioned before. It's through synapses,
Yes.
where chemicals pass through. Now, wiring, what we're talking about, is actually those neural pathways. We have these neural pathways in us. The question isn't about, we create neural pathways when we learn something new,
Yes.
right? Now, if I told you that you are the mayor of a city and your biggest problem is traffic in that city, right? What can you do to alleviate that traffic? But you've only got one road. You've got
road.
You've got one road.
Or one choice. You mean?
No, you've just got one road.
Are you
All the
talking about
traffic.
a physical road.
A physical road.
I got one road.
You've got one road.
Yeah.
But you have the ability to create more, and your biggest problem is traffic.
Okay.
What's your immediate solution? You can build roads, right?
Yeah.
So immediately, you've got one road. You've got traffic on that road.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to get rid of the traffic, alleviate it, you just build more roads.
Right.
So that there is less traffic on that existing road.
Yeah.
Our mind is sort of very similar to that.
Very interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if we're having negative thoughts about anything, let's say if we even go into the depths of this, if you have anxiety or depression or, even to the extent where you've got stuff like PTSD or anything like that, I'm not a mental health expert, but from what I've read, is if you give focus to learning something new, you're sending down less traffic towards that
road.
damaged road anyway.
Good.
Right? And if you associate those new neural pathways with something more positive, if you associate it with achievement, I think you mentioned serotonin, the chemical.
That's quite important because essentially what you're saying is sometimes lack of growth
is the reason why.
Is why we are stressed or anxious or fearful.
See, my worst, my biggest caveat, in fact, is that I'm very poor at giving relationship advice. Right? I hate it because if someone is treating someone bad, I'm like, yeah, break it up. If someone's treating someone good, I'm like, you should definitely give it a go. Yeah. There's no sort of in the mediation between it, right? So the biggest thing is when two people break up, right? When two people break up,
I actually have to point out the Faz has in fact once tried to give me relationship advice, so that made me laugh.
And it was awful. It was awful advice. The point I'm trying to make is that the immediate advice that anyone gives to two people breaking up is, you should think about yourself. You should, grow yourself, develop yourself. The reason why that advice actually exists is because they want you to essentially grow yourself and become a better person.
Yes.
When someone says, I'm working on myself.
Yeah.
But are they working on themselves because they actually want to work on themselves, or are they working on themselves to recover from who they were before so that doesn't happen again?
Right.
That is part of rewiring. If you learn something new, sometimes you don't need to rewire, you just need to new wire.
That's interesting. I've never thought of it like that. But what the biggest interesting part to me is I realize every time I read more books, I'm far less anxious.
Yeah.
Like far less anxious.
There is also a decompounding knowledge effect that is very complex to understand, but it's this whole idea is, it's the quote, the more I try to learn, the less I know.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, for example, if you had no idea what tennis even meant, for example, and then I told you what tennis is, as in it's a game that two people play with a racket. Now you have 100,000 questions about tennis.
Right.
You will ask where it's played, to the extent where what is the spherical dimensions of the tennis ball. You are now more in the unknown that you were before. If I didn't tell you what tennis was, you thought, oh, I have the knowledge of everything that I know. It's the whole thing where you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Right? So sometimes what happens when you have all these unanswered questions, you stop thinking about all the other things that you do know. All those things that possibly cause you stress are possibly weighing you down. So sometimes the best way to rewire, or the easier way, is to learn something new.
Okay. So a huge part of stress is we're not growing. A huge part of anxiety, we're not building new roads, so we're traffic jam.
Also, physiologically, your physiology has a big impact as well to your stress and rewiring. When you're trying to, and Achieve has gone through this before, when you're trying to achieve success and you're trying to have a better mindset, you're trying to be more courageous and more certain, but your body just says, I'm not ready. You're curled up in a ball, you're slouching, you're walking as if you're dragging your feet. Your body is telling your brain, I am not ready to act. And your brain will act what your body is telling your brain to do. So there's this thing that I started to do. It was actually not, I knew about this for years, but it's not actually until I started to really look at what am I not doing, and I started to consider doing that just 2-3 times a day. It's the star pose, the superstar pose. It's basically you like an X, like a superstar, and it stretches your body, and you feel bigger, and it somewhat tells your brain physiologically that you're ready. It's somewhat like stretching. You know when you're tired, but as soon as you stretch, your brain wakes up a little bit more. You can do that. You can force that. that's one of the things. Like for me, I've lost 10 kg since Cash started training me in the gym. That's had an effect on my work too. I've been able to not only do more work, put in longer hours, but I've been able to act on my work with more quality and more thought than before. Yeah. So what I used to be able to do in, let's say, 6 hours, I can now do in 3 and 4. And that's mainly because my brain is now working in multiple different ways, and that's allowed me to become more productive. So rewiring isn't just what you learn, it's very, very big too, but it's also what you do with your body as well. As Chief knows a lot about this, and I'd like for you to go through this, is your gut is like your second brain, right? And what you put in, what you eat, has a big impact on how you think. I mean, can you go through that?
There's actually some areas of study that suggest that your heart has neurons in it, and so does your gut. And actually your gut controls mood and emotions and how you feel. This is why when you're nervous, suddenly your gut turns. If you got to speak, suddenly you need the toilet 10 times before you stand on the stage, because there's this whole work going on. So we find that thinking is not just happening up here, but thinking is happening in various different organs of our own body. And what you said is important because you're talking about a physiological change. You're talking about an inward mental state change. I've always had this question: which one is more important? For example, for me, sometimes if I want to shift the way I'm thinking, I tell myself in my brain, be 10 times B, be 10 times bold. Act bold, you'll think bold. So suddenly, I just act like I know what I'm doing. And the moment I do, it's like my brain just goes bam, the genius emerges. But the moment I'm like,
I relate to that.
I don't know what I'm doing, I'm out of my depth, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, and I let things weigh down on me, I shut down all my options. But then I also find the approach of changing the way I think. Actually, I do this very purposely. So I'll go into a room, for example, I'll read a book. When I finish reading the book, I will spend time thinking about the words and imagining them, almost like you're chewing something. But imagining, okay, so what does that look like in your life? Getting a picture. So when you tell me Wealth Nation Bank, I've seen it a long time ago. It's so, or our office that we now use in Slough, I saw that ages ago, all the way in Woolwich Hospital when I was changing my thing. Which one's more important? Is the physiological change? You talk about Superman posing. Actually, I think it was the research that said you boost your immune system 30% just by doing this every day, a Superman pose. You can lose weight. There were so many different health benefits of just physiological change. The physiological change is the language your body is telling your inward person. But what you're saying is the message needs to go from the inside to the outside in a way as well. No, well, I guess it's still outside in. You're reading, you're learning, so still outside in. Is there a message that comes inside out that meets the outside in?
I think that comes from change of environment. I think the first step that you play in changing your mindset or rewiring to that extent, because changing mindset is a slight deviation, while rewiring is complete overhaul. I think environment plays a huge impact onto that, because where you grew up would be a completely different environment to where I grew up. And as a result, we have two completely different mindsets, even though we have common beliefs and common understandings, but those commons are aligned to sort of one very small niche, right? As in your perspective on, say, marriage will be maybe very different to my perspective of it, or how I'm interested in sports and you're not. So I think environment plays a big thing. I've always been told that if I'm a product of my environment, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean the people around me. It could also mean where I am location-wise and what's generally happening. If you're in the wilderness, and they did this study on, it was a very small study, it's not very, very accurate, but it's about these humans who were left and they grew up in jungles. And they could speak to animals because that's all they were, part of their environment. They didn't have any other humans to talk to. And that gives testimony to the fact that if we all never had humans around us, we would eventually learn how to communicate with people, with species of that environment. So I think sometimes part of rewiring is actually, if you're not happy with where you are geographically, we're talking about, no, it doesn't move, but also it could be the smallest of things, where if you don't like the look of your room, change it. Right? And that change could bring about so many different new things.
Absolutely.
For example, when you get a trim, for me, that is a big change.
Yeah.
I feel mentally and physically a lot better that, hey, look, if I look in the mirror, I don't look scruffy anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't got a hair on my mustache coming down to my lip,
Yeah.
right? And that's a big thing because it's sort of the way you're presenting yourself to you.
It's a language you're telling yourself.
Exactly.
You know, somebody said to I was going to put some socks on, and they had holes in them. And I said, I can't wear these socks anymore. Someone said, no one will know. I said, but I'll know.
Yeah, and you know, this actually plays back to the other part of it, because as being a Muslim, right? When we have that month of Ramadan, you know, people are like, and you guys will understand this better because you guys have fasted before. But people will ask you, oh, so you fast for 30 days? And we're like, yeah, so like every day from dawn until dusk. And they're like, not even water. We're like, yeah, like not even water. They were like, well, like when no one's looking, why don't you just, you know, yeah. And I'm like, but I know that God's looking, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, why would I, like, it doesn't matter, like, if anyone else isn't looking, I can't be cheating myself.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when you're at the gym and you know that you're doing 3 sets of 10.
Yeah.
If you feel tired after 8 and you quit then and you're like, oh, no one saw, but hey, you didn't get those gains, right? Those 2 extra reps could be the difference between you being at aerobic effect or anaerobic effect, and how your body recovers the next day.
Yeah.
You can't cheat yourself with rewiring either.
Yes. I think we've touched on major points. Learning new things, physiological change, environment change. I'd like to address another change that I think is a humongous factor. People change.
Yes.
Companions, who you choose. You know, what scares me is most people are passive about their associations. You don't choose.
Yeah,
I think your family is the only people you didn't get to choose. But we naturally allow people to gravitate, or really the science of it is we gravitate to people like us. My wife had this experiment done when my wife did a diploma in psychosexual health therapy. She wanted to understand some, I don't know, stuff about the mind and sex and whatever. She goes, day 1 of the course, they said to them, everyone jump around the room. The first person you feel to walk up and shake their hand. They walked up and shook the first person they just felt hand. They said, talk to each other. They spoke, and they found out, without knowing each other, they had so much in common. Single mom, plays tennis. So much in common. Just that there was almost a gut instinct. You and me are alike. You and me are like each other, and there was a natural connection. I think we have to, in some way, militate against that. Do you get what I'm saying? Because to me, your associations become your lid. So if I naturally gravitate towards you, it's because you're like me.
Yeah.
But if you're like me, like Einstein said, a problem can't be solved from the same level it was created. If we're two alike, then we are almost, there's no up from here.
Yeah, we're essentially going to come to the same solutions, the same endpoint. We may get there differently, but the end point will be different.
Yes.
And I think your point of sort of militating against that is the fact that sometimes our goals, if we need to get to them, we need to work with people of different disciplines, different thinkings. For example,
that's the difficult part. I'm intimidated by you because you're better at me than something. Or I don't want to be close to you because I assume you wouldn't want, we have nothing in common and you wouldn't want to get it.
Sometimes it's not even better. Sometimes it's different. Sometimes what happens is that you would come across someone who is nothing alike you, but you still need to work with them. For me, I'm not a creative person at all, but I'm very strategic. Right? I don't like the fact that I'm not creative. In fact, but when I come across a creative person, I've got to actually acknowledge the fact that, hey, you're someone, or you have capabilities that I don't.
Right.
But you may be the reason, but if we work together, we can achieve great things.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can plug into you like a jigsaw, that the missing part is what they are.
Yeah.
Right? And so I do agree that sometimes when we find similar people of the same attributes, sometimes you don't need it. It's like in a football team, if you can only accommodate one striker, you accommodate the better striker.
Yeah.
You don't just say, hey, look, I'll play both in the game. They're going to tread on each other's toes.
Yes.
The other thing I was going to actually mention was the whole idea of changing the people around you. is actually very important. Now, this may sound condescending, but I know of certain people who found that they've loved their parents as the best thing that could be there for you, and I don't think you should leave them. Sometimes that remains an option that you got to explore. I like to give a historical example that was once given to me. So something my father told me when I was growing up, and he didn't intend to tell me this on a basis that I should leave him one day if he becomes annoying. Rather, as a child growing up as a Muslim, he would tell you stories about the faith and whatnot. So he even mentioned this, and it sort of ties in about changing environment, and it's one of the most historical examples. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, is one of the most important figures in Islam. When he had been ordained to be the Holy Prophet, and the Holy Quran was revealed to him, when the city of Mecca had known about this, they ridiculed him and said, how can this man be the Holy Prophet? And he was getting a lot of opposition, but he had very few supporters. But he had a very powerful purpose, and he was divinely appointed. And so what you find in that is that he left his environment. He left his parents. He left his parents. His father died at a young age, so he was with his uncle. His uncle was a supporter of him, but there's other people around him who the friends and family or distant friends and family. He left them because he said, you are not aligned to my goal, my purpose. Even though his purpose was divine, it was powerful, it was ordained by God. He decided, you know what, I'm leaving this place, and he traveled to the city of Medina, eventually through his journey, and he fought battles on the way. But for him, his purpose was so big that he was like, I don't care if you're with me or not. I'm gonna achieve my goal, and it's one of the most historical examples that I can come up with. And I'm not saying that everyone is got a purpose that divine or that great, but it's sort of a historical example that if you have a purpose that big, if you want to achieve it, if the historical figures in history of much significance around the world were able to do that, sometimes it shows a path.
It's one of the great costs that you're talking about to achieving meaningful success. It's, can you lay down your family in a way? Because that is your environment. They're your primary environment, your family. They're the most import, whether by their actions or omissions. Whatever they did or didn't do, you are eternally who you are because of that initial environmental provision your family gave you. So to actually go against the grain of their own belief system, it almost kicks against your identity, because that's where you came from. But you're establishing, there's a new message in you, there's something you're establishing. And I think that's the cost most people aren't willing to pay. To say, do you know what, love you, mum, dad, but the way I can really help you is by breaking this bubble and going to a new level. Then come along later when you understand it. If you don't, then. And I think that's what breakthrough is about. I think there's few that break through, and when they do break through, they kind of go, wow, they didn't help us, so boo you. But actually, the gift that was given to you to be able to do that, to be stubborn enough to say no and break through, was so that you could be the person that breaks through and brings others in. Others get to enjoy the benefit. Unfortunately, not everyone is that level of leader to make that level of sacrifice. But yes,
I agree. I think I've got my own point, and I want to end on that. But just to touch on your point of can I be heard properly? Right, just like that. I think pursuing something extraordinary is offensive. It's that concept of how many people can you limit yourself talking to without being offensive. If I can speak to one person, and I'm trying not to offend that person, there's a few things that I can't talk about. Trying to pursue something excellent, that's your goals, unapologetically, is extremely offensive. When you're trying to not offend someone, just one person, it's easy. You just avoid the subject and you'll be good. But now you're speaking to 10 people at a time. Each and every one of those have got things that they deem offensive. Now, there's a lot less you can talk about now, because you're not trying to offend them. What if you're speaking to a crowd of 100, 10,000? What if you're speaking to a crowd of 100,000? How impactful can a message be when you're trying to not offend one person out of 100,000? And this is what I mean by, when you're trying to pursue your goals, you are going to hurt the feelings of people that is choosing mediocrity. Okay? So it's not just change your own surroundings too. When you're naturally trying to pursue something and you're rising in a different level, it's a filter. People will naturally fall behind, and it's not your fault. Okay, you can't bring them along with you. You can't bring them along with you, right? It's very difficult. It becomes heavy, and if you want to maintain the altitude and the momentum you're going in that direction, you have to love people enough to be behind. But in turn, you will gain friendships, new relationships, new partnerships, business relationships with other people that are on the same journey as you. Absolutely. And that's the best way it could be. It's a harsh truth, but if you want something more than average, it's a truth that everyone has to accept. Absolutely. And what I wanted to end with is don't despise the small beginnings. When I went into the gym, I wanted to bench 100 kg straight away. And if I was basing my success based on how well I can bench 100 kg, I would have called myself a failure. But a lot of people, like in the business, are trying to say, okay, I want to reach executive director. And because they're basing the success on executive director and they haven't gotten there yet, every day to them has been a failure. Whereas I went in to see if I can just lift 25 or 30, and I can do it for 10 reps, as Faz said, 3 times. Okay, if I can lose 2 kg of weight within a week, something like that. And it's the same time as if you are so focused on the big thing, but you're not actually appreciating the small steps of progress and milestones, it's gonna weigh you down, and your self-esteem is never gonna improve relative to your small steps of progress. And what a lot of people actually do is they never make those small steps of progress long enough, because they don't actually feel that taste of success, because they've set their bar so high of celebration that if I'm not making 100k a month, I'm not going to celebrate. So when they reach 10k a month, they still feel the same as when they first started. And that's a different rewiring that people need to have as well.
We've heard the various things that we need to adjust in our own life to bring about powerful rewiring. We heard about the traffic jam theory, I'll call it, where your brain is overwhelmed because you've only got one road, and maybe it's time to build some more roads, to learn some new lessons. We've looked at physiological changes that you can make to adjust your body so it tells a different message to your inside person. We've also looked at the environmental changes that are so essential, and it could be macro changes, and it can also be the micro changes, as simple as Faz mentioned, as cutting your hair or wearing a new suit or something that lets you know that you're in a new environment. Then Miguel brought it home with an understanding that success in the journey is a natural filtration process. And as you move towards success, you're going to be filtering out people who don't belong at the altitude, or maybe they don't belong yet at the altitude to which you belong to, and you should not feel bad for moving on. You're going to acquire new friendships in the process at the altitude that you're trying to move to. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this session on rewiring. We have some powerful moments coming up of business building opportunities. Germany's is launching again on Saturday.
Yeah, 31st of October.
31st of October. This week it's going to be a powerful time. And we're going to continue. We call it the 30-day challenge. I think it's going to be the forever challenge. We're just going to increase the frequency at which we're doing meetings. We're doing a phenomenal job on the trading that we're doing. Remember what Miguel just said. Sometimes we're looking for those big wins, and we're forgetting the small incremental changes that we're making every single day. The progress is so important to rewiring. But let me say this, acknowledging your progress is a huge step to your rewiring process. So I'll say journal your progress, write it down, appreciate the progress that you're making every single day. You may not be where you want to be, but you're not where you were. See you at the top.